Hey there, Toolaholics. Welcome back to part 5 of my truck bed camper build, where I'll be installing the exterior corner trims and building and installing one of the windows. First thing I needed to take care of was to tie up the hanging down house wrap on the underside here. And it was super fun. I got to lay in the snow and the ice and have everything fall out of my pockets while I did it. Now I'm cutting some strips of the mahogany underlay. This is going to go on the outside edge, and I'll hang on the outside of the truck bed box just to give a little bit of added protection from all the lovely things that are likely to get thrown up at it. I'm attaching it with roofing nails again, and once again laying in the snow and ice and everything falling out of my pocket. So here I am starting with the corner trims. I decided to go with some 2x2 galvanized steel flashing for this. Unfortunately, it wasn't a complete 90-degree bend, which made it a little bit difficult, but I made it all work, and I'm fastening it using aluminum screws. So gonna need a whole lot of those because we want this to stay in place. The reason I decided to put the metal corner trims on is because the mahogany underlay kind of self-destructs if it gets wet on the edges. So by putting metal trim over the corners, then that protects the edges of the mahogany underlay and just tidies everything up a little bit. All of the corners overlap, and that just keeps everything nice and solid, doesn't leave a gap for extra water to get in, and makes it look neat and tidy. If you've ever had to work with the aluminum screws, they're the screws that you use for aluminum trim and soffit and fascia and things, you know that wearing gloves to deal with these doesn't really work, which wasn't exactly the most pleasant thing in the world. And I still kind of dropped some anyways, but trying to have my gloves on some of the time. Here you can see that if you cut the one edge of the 90-degree trim, you can bend the other edge around over your hard object, and if you don't get a perfectly clean bend, you can just give it a little bit of taps with a hammer and clean it all up. The snips I'm using are siding shears. You don't have to have anything special like this. Any kind of tin snips will do. Because I'm overlapping all of my corners, measurements don't have to be completely perfectly precise. So as long as you're a little bit short, then you're probably good. And you don't necessarily need to be perfectly square either, which is nice because less measuring, it is less time. And it generally takes more time to measure and mark things out than it does to actually cut things. So I've got the majority of the trim on now. I did do some more when I didn't film, but you pretty much get the idea. And time to move on to building a window. So I'm going to make the window out of these old pieces of old mahogany skids that my dad and I salvaged from a job site about 20 years ago, and I had to go and dig out of a snowbank. So first step is to cut off the outside and get into solid wood because the outside edges are rotted, but look at how nice the inside of these pieces of wood are. Now that I know that I'm actually going to get some good wood out of these, I started by ripping off the outside edges to get down to clean wood. This process took quite a while and made a whole lot of really cool red sawdust on the snow, which when my niece saw it, my sister explained to her that it was PEI sawdust. As you can see in the trestle ladder in the background there, I've got a whole bunch of pieces that are ripped down into clean wood. The dimensions are not necessarily all the same or exact, but I've got all clean edges on them so that I can rip down and start milling into the dimensions of the pieces I need to build my windows with. Now that I've got the sides all ripped off, I'm ripping down into a dimension that's going to be sort of uniform and work for the majority of my pieces. And since my wall is 2 inches thick, I decided to go with having at least one 2-inch dimension on my pieces. After creating a lot of sawdust and little slivers of wood that get jammed up in the exhaust, I needed to clean things out a little bit because things were sticking and sawdust was blowing up in my face. Now that the saw is cleaned out, I can start ripping down my window pieces. I need 2-inch jam pieces that are 3/4 inch wide, and then my actual window frame is 1.25 inch by 1.25 inch, and then I have 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch window stop that goes inside of the jam. Now that I've got my pieces cut out, I need to put a slot into the window frame pieces. So I've set the depth on the table saw blade and set the fence so that it lands almost in the middle, and we'll cut a slot in each of the pieces that's a little bit wider than the kerf. And here you can see I've got all my pieces cut to build my first window, plus a couple of extras. It's always good to have some extras because you should always plan on fucking something up. To start off building the window, I started by building the jamb, cutting all pieces first, making sure that the equal sized pieces are exactly the same length so that I'll get a nice square jamb. Now that I've got my jamb all cut out, I'm assembling it with wood glue and 16 gauge brad nails, and then I will go back and screw the joints together with 1.25" number 8 screws. Drilling countersunk pilot holes for each of the screws because it's very hard wood, which would make it really difficult to put in a screw without a pilot. Plus, when you put in a screw without a pilot hole, then you'll end up splitting the wood, more likely. I'm using a large speed square inside of the frame to make sure that I get everything set square when I put the screws in, because in order to re-square it up, if it's out of square after it's been screwed together, then you have to bend the screws or split the wood trying to bend the screws. Next, I'm putting in the 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch door stop or window stop, whatever you want to call it. I realized afterwards that I probably should have done this after installing the hinges. It would have made cutting out the recess for the hinges a little bit easier if that hadn't been there already, but well, you figure things out as you go, and that's why I built one window instead of both at the same time, because I figured I'd screw something up or Now that I got my door stop pieces all cut, I'm gluing the full edge so that I get a nice tight closed joint and tacking it in with 16 gauge brad nails. Time to cut the actual window frame now. It's really important to make sure that the pieces that are the same length, so top and bottom are exactly the same length and both sides are exactly the same length, so that you end up getting a square frame. It's also really important to make sure you have your miter saw set right at 45 degrees. Now that my frame pieces are all cut, I can cut out my piece of plexiglass that's going to go inside of it. I decided to use plexi instead of glass because, for one, I can cut it with a skill saw. And the other reason is I decided it would probably be a little bit more durable bouncing around on the back of my truck, especially if I'm driving around off-road through the bush. So my first step is to do a dry fit, just in case I mess something up. Always, always, always plan on messing something up. Maybe you won't, and that'll be great, but if you plan on messing something up, then it won't be a problem when it happens. The dry fit worked out, and now I'm connecting all the frame pieces with the plexiglass inserted into the slot using wood glue and brad nails. Now that it's glued and tacked together with nails, I'm putting some screws in with countersunk holes again to tighten up the joints and make the frame a little stronger and a little bit more rigid. And now that that's done, just a little test fit into the frame to see if I fucked it up or not. And I didn't. Yay! So now I'm just sanding the joints to make them perfectly flush and sanding off the excess glue. I'm also sanding away all the saw marks, which I really should have done before I put the frame together. So I will definitely be doing that next time. Sanding is super duper boring, but I figured if I spend all this time milling this stuff out of skids, I should make it look sort of half decent. Now I've got it all sanded, I can mark out my hinge locations to get ready to cut the recesses for the hinge. I laid the hinges out on top of the frame and marked the edges of it there, and then rotated it up and marked the hinges where the hinges actually go by just laying the hinges against the marks and tracing it out. And I'm using a fiend saw to cut out the recess here. Most people want to do this with a chisel and a knife, and I'm lazy and impatient, so I'm using a fiend saw, and it worked out okay. Now that I've got the inside of the frame recesses cut, I can cut the recesses for the hinges on the actual window frame. And because I don't have that stupid piece of doorstop in the way, I can use my trim router with a flat cut bit instead of the fiend saw, which is about 100 times easier of a way to do it. Now I got my recesses all cut. I'm marking the hole locations for the hinge screws and drilling pilot holes for them. A lot of people will tell you that you should always use an actual screwdriver for screwing in door hinges. I'm really used to this impact driver, and I am competent with it, which means I am able to drive a screw in with the driver without overdriving it and stripping the screw. And we have great success. The window opens and closes and works exactly the way it should. Miracle. Time to install the window. First step is to cut out the house wrap and the vapor barrier so that I have an actual window hole. And I'm just gonna seal all that up with some tuck tape. Typically in like house construction you would use butyl flashing instead of just taping this, but this is a camper that goes on the back of a truck, so I figured the tuck tape would do, and also I didn't have any butyl flashing, so used the tuck tape. Got all my shims ready, and well, some of them anyways, and well, this really would have been a lot easier as a two-person job, or if I'd detached the actual window from the frame. But if you swear at things for long enough, you can all generally manage to do pretty much anything. So I got 4 screws, like 2 on each side of this window to hold it in place. I have 2 pieces of 1/2-inch plywood sitting underneath of it to give it a little bit of a gap for spray foam, and getting it all screwed in and set flush with the outside wall and set square and functioning so that it opens and closes. Now that I've got that all worked out, I can build my other window, which I won't show in the video because it'll be just more of the same. And stay tuned for the next part of the camper build where I'll build the door and door frame. I'll probably trim out the windows and might start working on the inside. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it.